Welcome to the Gladden Longevity Podcast with Dr. Jeffrey Gladden, where our passion is helping you to become an age hacker. On this show, we want to help you optimize your life energy, longevity, health, and human performance with impactful and actionable information by answering 4 questions. How good can we be? How do we make 100 the new 30? How do we live well beyond 120? And how do we live young for a lifetime? Now, here's today's episode of the Gladden Longevity Podcast. This episode of the Gladden Longevity Podcast is brought to you by the new molecular hydrogen formulas of Chill and Energy.
Yeah, Chill and Energy were a couple of things that I learned about through NES Health. And we discovered that when you combine their infoceutical with hydrogen, you actually get an expanded effect from what you would just using it by itself. So we were very excited to work through the ability to actually infuse, if you will, or imprint the hydrogen tablet with the information related to chill and to energy.
You can hear more about the physics of how this formulation came about if you go to the interview that we did with Harry Massey on episode 191.
You know, when we were trying this in the office, we gave it to some willing clients and also willing staff. And we heard repeatedly how much the chill actually worked for them. If they were kind of anxious or feeling upset about something, if they dropped the hydrogen in the water and let it dissolve and drank it, not only did they get the benefits of hydrogen, which is kind of energizing in a way of making your brain kind of wake back up, but they also felt very calm and relaxed. And so we were very excited to bring it forward. And when we started using H2 Energy and combining those two together, we found a really nice energy boost before we went to go work out or do a mountain bike ride or go for a run or any of these things. And so this is the first 2 of a family of hydrogen products, I'll say augmented or advanced hydrogen products that we're bringing forward. So these are really the most advanced hydrogen products, I think, on the planet.
I love taking an H2 Chill right before I hop in the sauna and an H2 Energy either before I do a podcast with you or afterwards because my brain is pretty tired. Get 10% off your order of H2 Chill and H2 Energy when you use the code podcast10 at gladdenlongevitysshop.com. That's podcast10 at checkout when you visit gladdenlongevitysshop.com.
Gladden Longevity Molecular H2, Chill and Energy. It's an upgrade to your hydrogen toolkit. Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Gladden Longevity Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jeffrey Gladden. And our mission is really to democratize the longevity practices of Gladden Longevity and to change the glide path of aging for the entire planet, quite honestly. We go about that by giving you actionable information. Can we actually crack the Hayflick limit? So our life every day revolves around those 4 questions, and we're working on those questions diligently every day here. To that end, we have, and we've probably mentioned this in prior podcasts, talked about some of the research that we're involved with, but I'd like to introduce you today to Scott Wehage, who joined us in January to be our director of research. And I want to let you get to know him a little bit and then give you a sense of the kind of studies that we're currently doing and the things that we're looking to do. So with that, welcome to the show, Scott.
Thanks very much. I'm excited to be here and excited to be part of this.
Yeah, excellent. So let the listeners know a little bit about your background. What's your background in research?
So I started as a biology major in college, not knowing what I wanted to do, not real aware of what jobs were out there. Just knew I wanted to do something research related.
Like most biology majors.
Right. So many paths you can take.
Right.
Immediately, I went into work at Johns Hopkins as a lab technician just to kind of get my feet wet. I was doing HIV. Actually, it was clinical research. I wasn't aware because I was in the lab side of it. Mm-hmm. And then, I did some other things that were not directly related to clinical research. But in about 2002, I joined the lab of Paul Talalay at Johns Hopkins University in pharmacology. And we were doing straight clinical research. That's when I became a clinical coordinator and then a program manager.
Okay. And how many years did you do that for?
So when I joined Dr. Talalay's lab, he was in his late 70s. And I thought, I'm going to learn a lot in as many years until he retires. I ended up staying there until he was in his 90s because we were doing prevention research with plants.
Okay.
and this was my first introduction to functional medicine and this type of research that's not directly related to pharmaceutical drugs or devices. Mm-hmm. And I found it to be fascinating, and the way I wanted to do it, what career I really wanted to be in was mm-hmm. here. Yeah.
Nice. And then at one point you ended up leaving Johns Hopkins also to do some other things, I think.
Yeah, I left. Our lab was kind of winding down a bit, and I went into, and I had never worked in industry, so I got a couple of roles doing device research in straight devices like microbiology, bloodborne mm-hmm. infections, and also invest in vitro diagnostic assays. Okay. I did that at Becton Dickinson. So I worked at Becton Dickinson for almost 7 years doing device studies, and then for another year and a half with a company called Specific Diagnostics, which became a part of bioMérieux, which is a big microbiology company from France.
Okay.
So we were purchased by them. And
nice.
Yep.
And so we reached out to Scott, I don't know, in the fall. Actually, we were introduced to Scott through a mutual acquaintance, Brian Kornblatt, who's involved with Vinia and things like that. He thought we might be a good fit for each other. And so we started conversations, and then Scott joined us in January. And Scott, tell us a little bit about your vision for the research here at Gladden Longevity, and I'm happy to kind of weigh in from my perspective as well.
Yeah, great. So when I started working at Johns Hopkins, the first project we did was kind of funny. It was based on the Defense Department. It was slightly after 9/11, so there were a lot of calls for unique projects, and we started looking at some compounds that are found in plants that are also found in rubber products. Mm-hmm. So that was my introduction to clinical trials, looking for rubber contamination on skin and in different people. But it quickly morphed into what they were doing there directly with plants, and I found it to be fascinating that we can probably do a lot of what we need to do for ourselves health-wise with plants and just the way we eat and exercise. Mm-hmm. And at the time, there wasn't much going on research-wise there. So when I left there, I just got more experience in other areas. But when I found this opportunity talking with our mutual acquaintance, it seemed like it was a job fit for me. It was coming mm-hmm. back to that type of research and that type of medicine where it makes so much sense to me. So I see us validating these protocols that you're designing that, as you said, to democratize this type of health for everyone, because it's all already out there. We just need to quantify what we're talking about and get that real world data and then share it with people and develop new protocols.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for me, you're a really nice compliment. I can envision what it is I want to see and create and what I want to prove out or disprove. But then you have the background to kind of back that up in terms of study design and IRB approval and some of the statistical analysis and access to that through channels that I don't have readily available to me. So it's a good fit in that sense. I think what I'm excited about with you joining is our ability to, start with trials that run a full spectrum. So what I mean by that is that we now have the ability to, and we've always had the ability to do self-funded trials where people come in and they pay to play, so to speak, and it could be related to anything like plasmapheresis, young plasma, stem cells, telomerase product that we've used in the past, brain frequency to optimize brain function, things like that. And then there are other trials now that, since we're set up with this, where people are coming to us and asking us to do some validation trials or provide some clinical data on a supplement or a product or something like that. And so it gives us the opportunity to do that. And then those studies become funded to where people can participate and even be paid to participate, so to speak, which is nice. And then it really kind of opens up another world for us too, in terms of collaborating with other practices around research projects and helping to democratize the research access and participation, which also sort of dovetails in with the Gladden Longevity certification course that's getting ready to be launched, where we can actually create a network of providers and people that are both interested and qualified to help participate and move the science along. So I think it really opens up lots of opportunities for us in those regards.
Yeah.
And then I think there's the opportunity to go for just pure outside funding that we've been looking into as well, where we can, we have a not-for-profit. We're not doing the research to make money on it. We're really doing the research to advance the science. And Gladden Longevity has taken, in the past, has taken its quote-unquote profits and plowed them into the research so that we can really advance the science here. But it's nice to have some outside resources to be able to do that too, because obviously we only have access to a limited number of funds. And if we can become funded through other relationships, that would enable us to expand and do even more. So do you want to talk a little bit about your experience with some of the fundraising, some of the other things that go on with these trials?
Yeah. So one of the things we'll be doing is it was specifically with hopefully more than one group. I think many more than one group. We would be looking to do some validation for them with our patients and with the population that we'll be able to recruit from the local area. And also we can look into these remote randomized trials that are done decentralized, where we don't have to be in the same place, which also kind of ties in with the different facilities that we want to collaborate with, and your certifications, where we'd have ready clinics to work directly with. And one of the most important parts of it, I think, is to validate the data so that it does become common, and that, eventually insurance would have to look at it and say, hey, this is something, we have to fund because, or pay for, because we have data on it now and it works.
Yeah. And that day may come. I'm not holding my breath for that, but that day may come, right? If they take off their blinders and start to look around.
Right.
But yeah, it's exciting to think about this, because I think in the space of longevity medicine and functional medicine, there's tons of anecdotal information, and there are some really good studies out there. There are some really well-studied supplements, some really well-studied technologies and things like that. But there's still a need for a lot of work to be done there to really kind of validate what something does.
Right.
And the interesting thing for the listener to understand is that just because something's good doesn't mean that it's always good. There's usually a sweet spot and an indication for it, right? So it's finding the right indication for this particular supplement or this particular process or procedure, and then being able to provide that in the proper dose to get the desired benefit. And learning what that is part of the research too, how to optimize that for any individual. So that's a piece of it too, right?
Yeah, directly. Yeah, and that's with the collaborations, and we learn about new products, new supplements that we may incorporate into what we do, and we increase our base of participants too for future trials and patients for the clinic.
Yeah, exactly. So right now we're doing a small trial looking at Vinia here in the office, actually, with about 8 participants over a month's period of time, looking to see actually what does it do? Does it increase clotho? Does it have impacts on vascular health? Does it improve energetics? Things like that. Do you want to talk about that for just a minute from your perspective?
Yeah, so we're looking at a supplement called Vinia, which is a red grape extract. It's been on the market for a long time. Thousands of people take it every day, or tens of thousands of people take it every day. We're looking at it currently to see what it does, what biomarkers are being activated, what do we need to look at, how do we look at this, and how it's improving our health. And there's a lot of data right now on cardiac health, but they're looking at other things. We're also looking to do a larger study with them on sexual function. I think that's where we're headed with the pilot study, is more of what is it doing that we can measure internally in the office, and then where can we direct it for actual.
Yeah, and the rationale, just so the audience understands, the rationale for thinking about it with sexual function is that Vinia is really a bioreactor grown grape that's very high in a particular kind of resveratrol called piceid resveratrol, PICEID resveratrol. It's highly absorbed, about 70 to 80% absorbed, as opposed to 2, 3, or 5% absorbed as regular resveratrol is. But then the resveratrol actually activates nitric oxide production and decreases AT1. And AT1 is a molecule that causes vasoconstriction. So the thought process is that if you take resveratrol, it could have a nice impact on blood flow and blood vessel responsiveness so that sexual function could be enhanced. So that's part of the reason there. Also, of course, that would work for exercise enhancement or brain function enhancement and just general cardiovascular health, blood pressure regulation, things like that. So,
yes.
It's interesting to look at all this.
Mm-hmm. We could probably see a number of trials from this breaking off from the data we get in the initial trials. What are we seeing? And what are the biomarkers doing? That'll inform us what's the next trial we want to do. And they've indicated that they're interested in working with us for quite a few trials, actually.
Yeah, exactly. And then there are other companies now approaching us with things that they want us to look at as well. So if you're listening to this and you have something that you'd like us to look at as to whether or not it'd be a good fit for us, we'd be happy to entertain that.
Absolutely.
And I think on the other side, if you're listening to this and you have access to funding that you would like to, through a not-for-profit or a charity or a foundation or a family office or whatever it might be, that you're interested to support this kind of research, reach out to us and let us know, because we'd be happy to sit down with you and kind of lay out for you in detail kind of what we're looking at. The sophistication of our trials are really quite sophisticated, because we're looking at playing the symphony of longevity, where we're actually layering together various technologies to see how far we can improve things.
Yes.
So an example of that might be brain function optimization. So with the brain frequency trial, brain frequency is a technology that uses EEGs to sort of map where the brain is initially, and then uses a modified form of transcranial magnetic stimulation to stimulate the neurons to grow and develop in ways that they need to in order to optimize brain function. But now we know that we can enhance that also by having people drink molecular hydrogen after the procedures, using red caps that put red light into the brain to augment mitochondrial function, things that we can do with certain hormones, optimization, either growth hormone release, testosterone, estrogen, that can have an impact on brain function, and then certain peptides to release growth hormone, and peptides to improve brain-derived neurotrophic factor to increase neuron growth and development, like CLANC and CMAX and things like that. So these are sophisticated trials that are really looking at how do we actually pull together this constellation of interventions that enable us to take somebody from a point of, let's say, cognitive impairment to a point of much higher level of functioning, or from a place of good functioning to optimal functioning, or treating the anxiety that they suffer with, or the depression that they suffer with, or the TBI, the traumatic brain injury that they had, concussion or otherwise. And then PTSD can be treated this way too. So if as you hear this, if you know of anyone that might benefit from this more comprehensive approach to brain optimization, please feel free to reach out and let us know.
Yes.
And just so you know, we tend to do on almost everybody underlying genetics, so we know how the brain is built. We know what it responds to, what it doesn't respond to. We know if there are genetic predispositions for Alzheimer's disease or methylation issues or whatever it might be. And once we see that picture, we can actually adjust supplements in there as well to kind of optimize the entire picture. So again, it's a lot of trials are like, well, we've got a widget. We're going to use this widget and see what happens.
Yeah.
But in biology, that never really gets it done. It's a complex system, and it needs a systems approach. And so that's the research that we're doing here. So if that appeals to you as you listen to this and you'd like to participate, this is a pay-to-play kind of trial. But if you'd like to participate, we'd love to hear from you. So
our protocols are unique in that way, as you just mentioned, because there's usually more than one arm, and we're looking at, we may be looking at one substance or one treatment, but we have the ability to then combine them and look at what's happening, because as you just said, it's all about a systems approach. It's not one thing.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. And then we have the research that we're doing kind of going after the actual drivers of aging too. So that's our life raft protocol that we're working with. And so if people are really all in on, how do I live young for a lifetime? How do I turn back the clock? You can reach out to us about that. And then that's also a pay to play scenario, but the dollars that are invested there are repaid, 1,000 times over, quite honestly, when you really understand where you are, how things work, and you know what to do, and you're confident in how to move forward. And that's the beauty of this kind of work. So, yeah,
we're testing, and then we're doing interventions, and then we're retesting, and we're doing feedback from the retesting, and then we're adding what we know, and the information's changing. And the more research we can do, the more trials we can do, the more robust the data is, and the more we can find these pathways that we need to link together that play the symphony.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's an exciting time. It's really a great passion of ours. It's not just like a sidebar for us. This is a central mission of ours, is to really go down this research pathway. And yes, we love practicing clinical medicine, but we know the research is so critical here and so key. So we can keep you apprised of that as we move forward. Scott, any other comments you'd like to make?
I was going to mention the XPRIZE that we were talking about.
Yeah. Let's talk about the XPRIZE. Go ahead.
Yeah. So there's a big competition coming up for longevity research called the XPRIZE. It starts in July. Registration starts in July and it runs for about 6 months. It's a complicated, as our protocols are. It's a systems approach to aging. They're looking at muscle function, improvements in muscle function, immunology, and cognitive health. And we would be looking at those 3 areas for improvement with a 1 year or less intervention. And we'd have 7 years or so to develop it. But the intervention would be a year or less and would improve aging by a minimum of 10 years with a maximum of 15, with a maximum of 20 on their agenda. And it will require it'll require funding and also a team, development of a team.
Yeah, agreed. And I think the interesting thing for us is, as we read through the XPRIZE criteria and the testing that they're doing, it's interesting to us. We're already doing most of the testing that they're talking about and have been actually for some time. There's a couple of things that they added that we'll add in. But it's also interesting to us that we feel like we've been working in these 3 areas, as well as many other areas, in a way that we feel like, we can probably do what they're asking us to do today, quite honestly. Right. And so it's a question of really kind of pulling some things together, putting it into a trial. And if people would like to participate, if you'd like to be an XPRIZE participant, let us know. At this point, we don't have funding for it per se, so it still would be a pay to play. But you could be part of the XPRIZE and you would be getting access to the latest treatments and interventions that we have to offer. So could be very, very fun. Yeah. Yeah.
It's very similar to our protocols with looking at the 3 different areas and how they all intertwine. That they all help, there are certain interventions that speak to all 3, and there's some that are just 1 or 2 of the areas, but yes.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I think people need to understand that biology really is this complex system, and it really takes a systems approach. And in that systems approach, what you're trying to do is to find the most elegant solutions, right? What are the fewest levers that we have to pull in order to kind of coax the complex system back into a youthful expression, if you will. And that's what this is about, trying to make it as elegant, as simple as possible, at the same time getting the best result that's possible. So that's,
And I'm so optimistic about it because we do know a lot of this stuff works. Now we just want to quantify it. And we do know that a lot of the interventions that are happening now in medicine don't work.
That's right.
Or that people are taking medications because they were prescribed. But a lot of times only 4% of the people that take them are getting a benefit, or less than 10%.
That's right.
So we can do real world democratized medicine here and reach out to the world.
Yeah, no, it's super exciting. It's really why we're here. It's part of our global mission to change this glide path of aging for the planet. So yeah, super fun. Well, Scott,
Yes.
we'll keep the audience posted. We'll have you back on. We can do some updates on some of the research as we get the data back and discuss it, things like that.
That'd be exciting to talk about some of the data we're going to get because I think it's going to be very, very exciting.
Yeah, agreed. And again, if you're listening to this and you'd like to participate or you feel like you have access to funding or any of that, please feel free to reach out to the website, gladdenlongevity.com. Just reach out through there and let us know that you're interested in the research, and we'll get back to you and talk through, what might be the best fit for you. So, yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Scott.
Thank you. That was excellent.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Gladden Longevity Podcast. If you would like more information on what we've discussed or other topics, please reference the show notes or go to gladdenlongevitypodcast.com. You can also find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter by searching Gladden Longevity. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to get future episodes delivered to you and share our podcast or this episode with someone in your life that you may find benefit. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another exciting episode. The Gladden Longevity Podcast is provided for informational purposes only. It does not constitute medical advice. This content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of a physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. The use of any information and materials linked to this podcast is at the listener's own risk.